Hey folks, welcome to Bear Mountain today. Today we're going to be kind of walking through a typical what do we do on week 7 on the farm. And some of the things that we've got going we're going to show you in the greenhouse and a couple of things down in the hoop houses. So stay tuned, it's coming up. Okay, one of the problems we've had this year so far is we seem to be getting more algae growing in our mini blocks than we've had in the past. And part of it is I think we've had to leave the humidity domes on a little longer than we wanted to in our basement. We had, and we've eradicated them, but we've had some mice problems. This year, for whatever reason, it just seems like mice they're everywhere. And we got rid of them, but we had some damage like on snapdragons earlier.
We have 9 cats.
We have 9 cats, but they sleep most of the day, then we feed them, and anyway, long story. But so what we did is we, on our Lisianthus and Foxglove, and we had some perennials over here, I think they were Veronicas, we ended up leaving the humidity domes on longer. Usually we only leave humidity domes on until we see sprouting, and then we pull those guys off and get a fan running so that we have airflow over these guys. And we didn't get them off soon enough, so algae began to start to grow. And one of the things that we're trying out here is using LAB to kind of knock back any kind of algae growth or mold growths on things. And I think it's going to be successful. We did a test on some Lisianthus blocks, and we'll show you the difference between one treatment versus one that hasn't been treated at all. That was our Foxglove. And what we used a 1 to 50 dilution of LAB. And so what that means is if I had a quart of water in a spray bottle, I put in a tablespoon of LAB and kind of make sure that's mixed up, and then use that as a spray over the top of the blocks, making sure you're coating all of the blocks. And did that about on the Lisianthus. We did that about 4 days ago and noticed quite a bit of difference in terms of the algae kind of receding back. So I'll show you here how to mix it. It's really pretty simple. Okay, this is LAB that we didn't super saturate. It was made last October. It's still good. It's been in the fridge, and it's still really viable for another few months. And we've been using it for all kinds of things here on the farm. Mostly bokashi at this point in time of the year. But what we're going to do is just take a tablespoon of the material and make sure I don't drip it anywhere, and then mix that into a quart of water. Okay, so it'll disperse itself pretty fast in that quart, and this is what we're going to use to basically battle the other microbiology that's going on in here. I don't want to use it too many times. Once I get enough of it knocked back, I think that's basically where I'm going to stop. So then we'll show you now one of the Lisianthus trays that we treated about 3 or 4 days ago, and then show you the next tray we're going to try this on, which is our Dalmatian Foxglove. Okay, so we take the LAB and we just kind of give it a good shake, to kind of make sure it's mixed up. Now this tray here is Lisianthus that it was done from old seed, so we've got 3 different varieties in here. Some came up fairly well, some of them not very good at all. But the biggest problem that we had on this thing was there was a really good green growth algae on the whole thing. And even with better ventilation, and it was a mess. So we even had a little spot of mold here and a little spot of mold there, which appears to be arrested at this point. This has had, there's one spot right there too. So we sprayed this with the LAB solution about 4 days ago, and it looks like it's starting to get the whole thing under control. And the Lisianthus is still growing, so we're going to pot these guys up pretty quick. Bump, excuse me. So basically, I just want to make sure I'm not spraying this. I want a nice fine spray. I don't want to blast these guys into oblivion. So, oops, a little too far. There we go. Okay, so we're gonna just make sure that we get everything coated until it's got a nice glisten to it. I want to make sure that it gets into the cracks. And that's basically it. Okay, so we also want to make sure we keep this in good airflow so that we don't keep adding to the problem. This area right here was the heaviest infestation, and it's definitely changing. It's not as bad as it was, but it's still pretty green. And it doesn't seem to be hurting the plants at all. The LAB seems to be kind of like, I think it's going to be one of those things where we're not going to eradicate it totally, but we're just going to stop it from getting worse. So let's check out a tray that had absolutely no treatment. That would be the Foxglove. Okay, here's an example. This is Foxglove Dalmatian series. We've got rose, peach, and white in here. And you can see the algae. As a matter of fact, it's almost like creating its own little sheen on top of it. In some cases, the algae is actually, it's really probably just a precursor to growing moss because you can see on some of these guys, there's moss. And the worst thing about this stuff is the coating of it almost creates, if the block goes to dry, it almost has a very difficult time of absorbing water. And so we're going to use the LAB to see if we can knock this back to stop it. What we may end up getting is a situation where it just doesn't get any worse, which is okay. As long as the plants keep growing, then we're going to be okay. As a matter of fact, this one area right here is almost looks like it's growing some form of a slime mold. I mean, this is a really bad example of how to treat something poorly. And you would think with years of experience we would know better, but anyway, so we're going to do the same treatment. We're going to make sure these guys are all really well coated. And I think what's going to happen here is, particularly the molds, they're going to they're going to stop growing in their tracks. And the algae, I don't think it'll do it any favors either. Really making sure that I'm getting them all coated. Okay, so what's interesting now is, if you may notice, is that the color is actually turning a little lighter. It's almost turning like a washed out lime color now, instead of a deep dark in this particular area. So it's definitely, I mean, it's hitting it and it's doing something. So we'll notice, I think, a difference in a day or two. It should really knock this back. And we may have to give this another treatment just like we did the Lisianthus. I'm sure we will, because this is in pretty bad shape. So this is one thing, that's a bane to a lot of people, particularly when you're using peat-based mixes and you're making soil blocks, is that humidity is really, really important. You got to get the humidity domes off. We made a classic mistake, rookie error, and this is, what you get. Okay, so watching your humidity levels is key. You really got to, once the humidity domes with these guys are probably good for just until you see the germination. And lots of times, you kind of feel like, well, there's only some of them germinating, maybe I should leave it on a little longer. And well, reality is, probably as soon as you start seeing 10-20% of something germinating, it's probably time to get that airflow on them, because the rest of them are going to catch up as long as you don't let the blocks dry out. And I think that's the key. So I do believe the LAB, though, will control it from getting worse. It's not going to cure the problem. I'm not going to walk out here in a day and find, hey, it's all gone. Nah, it's probably not. But it's going to stop it from getting worse and give the plants a chance to grow to the point where we can bump them up. So let's move on to the next chore. I can learn to speak. I really can. These are our Apricot Impression. We just finished harvesting the ones out of here that are merchantable. And what's left are about the 15 to 20% that typically we find in our tulips that for whatever reason they didn't form a good enough head, or they didn't form a head at all. So sometimes what you got to realize is that when you're putting tulips in the ground, it's not always 100%, particularly on these 5-degree tulips. So anyway, we're going to yank these guys out and put the sunflowers in that Denise is working on.
Okay, this is week 7, like Tony has mentioned, and that means that most of our very first tulips have been coming out just in time for Valentine's Day, which that's great. Some years we've missed it totally, but this year we've got a good amount of tulips that are coming out to our customers. After Tony pulls all those tulips, bulb and everything, like they're one and done here on our farm, that leaves a blank space in our hoop house, and that's valuable land area to be able to grow in. So we need to find something that would go into that spot, and all the rest of them, that the tulips that come out, we needed another crop before we plant things like celosia, which would be our summer into fall crop in this spot in the hoop house. So what we discovered is that there is a sunflower that we can grow in that spot that fits in there. It's not super large. It doesn't grow, 5 or 6 feet tall. It stays around anywhere from 20 inches to like 30 or 40 inches. And it's easy enough to grow in there really close. And we can put hoops over it to protect it if the weather, goes bad for us. And it's called Premier sunflower. And it comes in an orange, and it comes in a yellow and a light yellow. But our favorite is the orange. It looks like a traditional sunflower, but it's really tiny. The heads are only about this big, and they're, that tall, or they work perfectly in bouquets. And so our designers really like them coming on in, if I get them planted now and they get up, they will be ready in the first part of May to middle May. And the whole idea is that as we pull the tulips out, these crops come in behind them and fill in that space for another crop before we put in our main summer crop. So this is a really cool little sunflower to add. It's not big and bold. It's small. It fits in a vase with other beautiful spring flowers, and our hopes are that we get it in time for Mother's Day. So I guess I gotta get seeding. So if you want to follow along, I'm gonna be seeding and talking. Okay, the other thing that I wanted to mention while I was going to be seeding these little guys is old seed. And I have been caught big time this year with old seed that fails to germinate. My first obvious mistake on that was the Dusty Miller. I seeded 300 mini blocks with Dusty Miller because it's a very popular flower that we grow in on our farm, and 300 seeds, and I thought that the seed was going to be still viable because I didn't think it was that old. And out of 300 seeds that germinated, or didn't fail seeded but failed to germinate, I got 60 seeds of Dusty Miller, which is not enough for us. So that was a costly mistake because I didn't have anything newer to seed with. So I had to get online again with seed providers, and I was still able to get some Dusty Miller, but I had to wait. Wait for shipping, wait because we're in a pandemic and it's, the seed suppliers are just absolutely slammed with everybody wanting seeds. And I just got caught in that group of people who had to wait. I got my Dusty Miller several weeks later, and I've already got it seeded and it's in the house, and I'm hoping that I've got a better outcome on this round. But the mistake was on my part was thinking I could squeeze another year out of this seed, and what it does is it costs you time. Something that takes 7 to 14 days, is that you wait around for 7 to 14 days before you find out it didn't come up. And so you're already further along down the road. And if you're like us and you have a tiny little greenhouse and plant stand, the logistics in our house is very critical. We work out a plan of what we're gonna have, and it's hard to talk and seed at the same time. It's like chewing gum. The logistics of that is that we have this timed to a specific time, and when something messes up and now has to come back in the second time to be part of what it's taking up a space in the greenhouse. Use my fingers. Now it's in the way. And when you have things like Lysianthus that you're also trying again, and I know, I should buy plugs, but we're stubborn. We want to keep trying to get those to come up without using plugs. And they take so long, and they're holding a spot in the greenhouse for a long time, several weeks, months. And to bring something back in is just throws everything off. So, lesson learned. New seed is always better. It gets expensive, I know that, and when you have, like, I have 1,000 of these sunflower seeds, and you say, oh, that's just too many that I can work with. Well, in the past it wouldn't have been. It's a little more tricky now that we're in a pandemic and we don't have as many customers, but I still will probably use most of these seeds for this year. But I understand, people's hesitation on buying huge quantities, because it's really easy how fast the seed goes bad. And Dusty Miller, shallot seeds didn't come up very well for us. And the other thing that I was trying to think of is we had some lettuces that didn't come up very well. Okay, so now all my sunflower seeds are in my plug trays here. There's 72 here, and they need to be covered, and I'm going to use the coarser variety of vermiculite to cover them rather than the super fine. These are a big enough seed that they can punch through this vermiculite with no problem, and they have tendency on this type of block, they have a tendency to not mat up as easy as the other one does, because these will be followed with good watering in to make sure that that the sunflower seed gets nice and soaked in, so not wet, but enough that we'll get the process going. The other thing is that I will leave them out here in the greenhouse. We're coming on, the end of the week. We're going to have some pretty cool weather, and kind of watching for whether we're going to have snow or not. Please, no snow. I don't want to scrape tunnels. But anyway, we will heat this if it gets super, super cold. But I'm going to put this tray on a heat mat and run it at about 72 or so degrees, which is just about right for these guys coming to get germinated and start to grow. Once they're up, then we'll make sure they get under the lights, and so that we don't get any super stretching or anything like that. But if we're doing this right on the right timing, these will be perfect. We'll be past what we believe is this cold spat, and then we're in zone 8B here in Oregon. This has worked every year we've tried this once we figured this out, so we just have to figure out exactly when to do this. And we're thinking that these will come up right after this cold spat and move on to typical Oregon spring weather, which is sun and showers and maybe a hailstorm or two. But these will be growing in our unheated hoop house, and if we have to, we can cover, but we've only covered once, I think. I can't even remember for sure, but so this is just a super alternative crop to go between the tulips and before our main summer crop. So I thought I would share that with you. Okay, so I got all the sunflowers seeded, and they're sitting back there behind me on a heat mat. The ambient temperature in here is about 50 degrees or so, and so the heat mat is just in the process of warming up. And moving on for this week, one of the other things that I'm replacing is shallots. They were part of that group of old seed, and just got the packages of 2 types of shallots from Johnny's, Matador and Ambition, that I just arrived yesterday. And so I'm going to seed those again to hopefully get a better crop of shallots. And after I'm done with the shallots, next up on my list of things to seed is we're doing a couple of different kales. Calibration mix from Johnny's, a white Russian kale from Johnny's, and then we're doing a Mizuna leafy Asian greens, and one last butterhead lettuce. I have some lettuce that's outside enjoying some sunshine, and just kind of getting a little coolness to them to encourage growth and stuff. And I'll show you a picture of that. And then after I'm all done with seeding today, the next thing is major bump up. I have dianthus to bump up. I probably will take a look at the Lysianthus and decide if I need to wait a few more days before I can start putting them in. They're really tiny, but they seem to do better in a real tray rather than, just in the mini blocks. So there's plenty of things happening here. Things are starting to bloom. We have some daffodils blooming. Besides the tulips, we harvested some anemones for a customer for Valentine's Day. That was exciting. And I've seen columbines starting to come up. We don't have a lot this year, a lot of rodent damage and stuff. And we're watching our hellebores. That's the next fun crop down the road, several weeks to maybe mid-March. But it's always exciting to get those to coming up. So we just decided to give you a little tour of week 7 on the farm. Most of it's just repetitious. Seed. And so we just wanted to share what's happening here and hope that, you're all not too snowed in, hoping that we won't get any snow. Even a tiny bit we don't want. It's a 4 or 5 houses to pull snow off of. Too old for that. So thank you for dropping by and checking out what's happening here on Bear Mountain Farm. And we hope that you have a really super good day and take care.